happen if we break up. Not manifesting
Oh,
that. I don't believe in manifesting, but like breaking up, like that's like a milestone. And then,
oh. Hi, welcome to Adulthood Pending Podcast. I'm Annalise.
I'm Brittany.
and I'm Kimmy.
We're a podcast for college students, recent graduates, or anyone else figuring out that being an adult isn't as simple as it's made out to be. Join us as we share how we navigate our careers, post-grad lives, and the whole adulting experience.
In today's episode, we're going to be discussing what this whole podcast is about, adulting. We're going to be talking about a few of the things we've learned being an adult, the moment when we felt most like an adult, and where we are now in our adulthood journey. To start off with, let's all introduce ourselves. I'm Kimmy. I graduated in May from Scripps College. I'm currently interning as a marketing intern, and I'm searching for full-time jobs so I can get employed.
I'm Brittany. I grew up in Southern California and I went to school at Scripps College and graduated in 2019. So right now I'm working as a medical scribe and applying to med school.
Hi, I'm Annalise. I grew up in Shanghai and I graduated Scripps College 2019 as well. And I'm now working as a software engineer at a tech company in Boston, Massachusetts.
You might have noticed that we all attended Scripps College, which is where we all met.
Yeah, so we all met at school and we actually all became friends through participating in programs designed to support Asian and Asian American students, and eventually we all ended up living together. So you might have noticed that Annalise and I are 1 year older than Kimmy, and so it's actually been about a year since we've all been together, and so we're just going to go right into why we decided to start a podcast. So my personal motivation for starting a podcast on the topic of adulthood is, since graduating, I used to think that all my friends had it all to put together and knew what they were doing. They all started a very different career path than I did. And so I felt like for a lot of the times I was watching from the sidelines and seeing everyone thrive while I felt like I had no idea what I was doing. And but when I would talk to them individually, they would kind of tell me the same kind of sentiment, that they were also struggling and having a hard time. And I just really wish those voices and stories were more normalized and kind of brought to light, because I feel like I was just under the impression that everyone had everything figured out while I didn't. So that's why I'm really excited to kind of talk about these stories and kind of our own struggles, so that someone else doesn't feel like they're the only one that is kind of having a hard time through this part of their lives. So Kimmy, what was your motivation for starting a podcast?
Mm-hmm. I wanted to start a podcast, I think, for a few reasons. The first being that I'm an avid podcast listener. I love listening to podcasts, and I definitely listen to actually more podcasts than music at this point. But a lot of the podcasts that I listen to are very like news or information heavy, but I do like the ones that are more storytelling and narrative. So that's why I'm excited to be doing this one. On top of that, I think in a podcast, what makes it so unique is that it's a topic that's dedicated to one thing, which is very similar to like a classroom, having those discussion-based courses. And that's something that I haven't been a part of for a while after going into the econ route. And then lastly, I think one of the main like trigger points was that my friend had just started a podcast and I was giving her all these tips and tricks. And then I was like, wait, why don't I just start one with my friends? So I'm really happy to be here and just share our experiences adulting so far.
Yeah. And then as for me, I'm probably the one who listens to podcasts the least, maybe out of everyone. I know, Kimmy, you listen to a lot of like different narrative and news, and then Brittany, I know you like murder podcasts and also news. For me, I like podcasts have always been like kind of an interesting thing that I've always wanted to kind of get into, but never really found one that I really connected with. And so for me, I kind of wanted to create one that I thought maybe hopefully could reach out to other people. And I feel like adulting and adulthood is just something that everyone goes through, right? So it's something that people can relate to. And because we're going to be focusing also on like our struggles and maybe like tips and tricks, hopefully the things that we say or discuss in this podcast could then help someone else, or it could give them like the comfort of knowing that adulthood isn't as easy as, you know, we were maybe told or like believed growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So the internet defines adulthood as the period in your life where you're fully grown or mature both physically and intellectually. But we've decided to define adulthood as the time in your life with the most change, growth, and ambiguity. So I guess, do you feel like you've entered adulthood now? And if you do, when was the first time you felt like an adult?
So personally, growing up, I think I always associated adulthood with graduating college just because for pretty much all my life, I was primed to just get a degree in higher education. And so, yeah, that was kind of like the pinnacle of becoming an adult, is just saying that you graduated college and probably got a job, maybe had bought a house when I was naive and thought that was attainable, since right after graduating college. Um, but right now, especially since graduating college, I really don't feel like an adult, just because I guess of my circumstance of applying to grad school, and so taking this gap year, and I'm living at home, and I just don't have a lot of risk, I think, associated with my actions. And yeah, I don't know, I realize that I'm very lucky to be in a position where I don't have to think about where my rent is coming from, or like where I'm going to get my next meal from, because obviously I have my parents to fall back on. Yeah, I just really don't think I've really achieved that adulthood status I thought I would feel once I got a college degree.
Did you feel like an adult in college?
Yes, I did feel the most adult in college, just because I felt like that was the period of time I had the most independence. But at the same time, I acknowledge that during that time, I was kind of in this like pseudo adulthood phase, just because, you know, I had a dining hall to eat food at, and the worst thing that could happen was I wouldn't study for a test and probably bomb it, uh, which I'm sure during college is like such a big failure. But I guess looking back, I've done badly on a lot of exams, and I've turned out okay. But yeah, it is weird right now to go from that period of time in college when I did feel more adult-like, to now when, even though I'm going to a job, I come home and my parents make dinner most of the nights, or get dinner. And so yeah, it's kind of a weird phase in my life, because it's almost like I'm regressing back into like my high school self when I lived at home full time, and you know, had my parents to like fall back on. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally feel the same way, like the kind of state of regression, just like after moving back home and having all these like independent experiences in college, because to me, adulthood is defined through independence, like being able to really carve your own path. And like, I remember one time in college, someone just told me that like college and adulting is the one time that you can be as selfish as you want to, and like society is okay with it. So now being back home is just like, you know, a little bit different.
So when you say like being as
Yeah.
selfish as you want to, does that mean just like doing whatever you want for the sake of what makes you happy? Like, what does
Mm-hmm.
that, what do you think they meant?
Yeah, I think that's what they meant. Like, since, we aren't, at least like we in particular, aren't really tied down to anything, whether it be like kids or marriage or like a house to pay off, you can really just do your own thing and worry about what's most important to you in like the next 5 years. So, to answer your initial question, yes, I do think that I have entered adulthood just because now I do have more responsibilities. But being at home, I definitely think that like kind of caps the growth on becoming an adult. Um, but as far as like the first moment that I actually felt like an adult, that definitely wasn't when I legally turned into adult when I was 18, but more of when I was doing stuff on my own. So this past fall, I was like studying abroad in Silicon Valley and working there through my school's program. And that was a really great experience because I was just like cooking for myself, commuting on my own. And on top of that, the internship that I was doing was very like, it just felt like a full-time job, since I was the only intern there and I was given a lot of responsibility. So I think that just kind of like boils down to what an adult is just someone that has more responsibility and ownership over things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, Annalise, because you also had an experience of living on your own before moving back home, if you both felt similar.
Yeah, so for context, I'm right now in Delaware with my parents because my whole company is working from home. So I kind of temporarily moved down here early June. But before that, like I was definitely hanging out with friends on weekends a lot. I would commute to work and do the whole 9 to 5, and then at the end of the day, I would go to the gym, come home, cook, all of that. And it was very structured. And I feel like that to me is also kind of like an adult, like you have a very structured lifestyle in a way. And so then to have that kind of independence and then move back home to be with my parents, it's definitely been a little strange just because I'm an adult. I'm an adult, but I don't feel like one entirely. Mainly because I'm still like in ways dependent on my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I will say, like, I guess the first time that I felt like an adult was probably when, similar to you, Kimmy, when I was like in ways like independent for the first time. So I was doing an internship in New York City one summer, and that was like my first time living on my own away from my parents outside of college, and to just like be thrown into like the working life, like buying your own groceries, cooking your own meals, like everything, paying rent, all of that. So that was probably like the first time I felt like an adult. That was also when I got my first credit card. I remember that was a huge deal. I was like, I feel like an adult now that I have a credit card. So I think also for me being an adult is very like, there are certain tangible things that to me define an adult, even though it's not like they're completely like, what is the word I'm looking for? Not, is it like
Mutually
mutual?
exclusive.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive, but like in my mind, for some reason they are. Like, for example, credit card, putting down a down payment on a house or something,
Mm-hmm.
investing, that's a big one. That's just something that I don't think I can ever
Yeah.
grasp anytime soon. To me,
Same.
that's like
Same.
prime adult to me, is like investing.
So I noticed that a lot of us brought up that we felt most like an adult when we had our own independence, but it also involved a lot of us doing things and accomplishing things. So that kind of makes me curious to learn, like, how is our perception of adulthood shaped by the society we live in? Like being in this capitalistic state of like, you have to do, and be as productive as possible versus like when you're a kid, you can just kind of live your life and not necessarily like put stuff into society so it will like bring you benefits back.
Yeah, Kimmy. So I was actually thinking something very similar when you brought up the concept of adulthood being marked by having a lot of responsibilities, because it's interesting because I feel like responsibilities in most senses is like paying your mortgage, you know, paying your bills, buying groceries, that kind of stuff. But I feel like, I don't know if it's because of the culture of our school or like the culture of going into higher education in general, but I feel like there's also this responsibility to like, okay, I'm not gonna phrase this correctly, but like becoming the best version of yourself to like contribute yourself to society as a good thinker, someone who's just well versed, just someone that's just like the best version of yourself. And I feel like when you're in college, that's like a responsibility you have to just like work on yourself, but it's also like a selfish responsibility. But it's interesting because I feel like that's tied into a responsibility you have to be an adult, to be like the most educated, the most you know, best version of yourself. So I think that's interesting. Like when you graduate, you're coming from this perspective of like, oh, I'm gonna work on myself, I'm gonna like work on my identity, work on like what I like, work on knowing what I'm good at, and then like once we graduate, you have to like automatically transfer that to applicable skills to society. Like somehow that selfishness of working on yourself is translated into becoming a valuable asset in society. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm just really interested in the concept of responsibility, like to yourself, and then like once you graduate, it's like responsibility to society and contributing to the workforce. Okay, and it looks like you want to say something, because I know that was really rambly.
I was just thinking, like, I feel like there are clearly very different definitions of adulthood. Like, there's the one where it's like you want to strive for higher education and you want to strive for ones where it's like the best version of yourself. But then there's also the side where people are thrown into adulthood just because of that's just like the situation that they're in. And I feel like for them, a lot of it is the idea of responsibility, right? Like it's the responsibility of taking care of yourself, maybe taking care of like your family, whether that be like parents, grandparents, siblings, you know, the responsibility of like earning money, making an income, stuff like that. Like I feel like that there's different variations of adulthood that I think a lot of people, at least like I guess like for us, we have like the privilege of not having to worry about one version because we did go to like a liberal arts school, we did go to college, we did all graduate, we did all have like that opportunity. And so for us, like adulthood, I guess is like more focused on what happens after you graduate. But then I also think it's important to like acknowledge that for some people, they don't have that opportunity. And
okay, so Annalise, just so I can understand this correctly, you're talking about responsibility specifically pertaining to groups of people who, when they go into adulthood, have to go straight into supporting themselves, supporting their families, like that kind of thing. Is that what you said?
Yeah, but I was saying more like there are different variations of adulthood, and that like that's just one. Like certain people will see entering adulthood as that, whereas like for others it's like about getting a higher education, and maybe for others it's about like finding a job.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, because I think especially considering what we've kind of imagined our audience to be as postgraduates, graduates, or college students, I think it's important to acknowledge that like we come from a very specific viewpoint of what we think adulthood is, just because of like our privilege and like the benefits we have to go to college and have parents that support us. And yeah, it's just important to acknowledge that. I think, Annalise, that different concept that people might have, but we just really can't speak to it because we just don't have that experience.
earlier, Brittany, you had said how you thought that you were the only one struggling, and how you would then talk to friends individually and they would say that they were having a hard time too. And I do feel like a lot of that is also attributed to social media. Like no one's going to be posting on their whatever, like, I don't know how to file taxes, or like, hey, I'm feeling really lonely. Like no one's going to be posting about that. Everyone's always posting like when they're hanging out with friends or when they're like doing something. And so that's obviously something that is very much it's been, what is the word I'm like for it? Not like manipulated or like filtered. You know what I'm trying to say?
Manufactured kind of.
Yeah, like it's like kind of like it's the things that we see on social media are like the things that is how we're interpreting their life. But what we don't see is like their struggles. So like sure, maybe that there's a handful of people out there who like feel like they're thriving right now and that they're doing really well and like good for them. But then a lot of the times people, I think, more often than not are actually struggling and like not knowing what to do, and that's never really discussed. And I feel like until you like actually talk to them one-on-one, which is kind of what you were saying, Brittany.
Yeah, it's even though like social media aside, like usually when I catch up with someone, it's maybe once, every 2 to 3 weeks, maybe more frequently if I'm closer or spread out. And I'm not gonna just say on a call like, hey, I'm just like really struggling so hard.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know, like that was one thing, like I think I got better at it just because it just built up in terms of like my own mental health. I'm just like an external processor, so like it helps me to talk about that kind of stuff with people. So I had to like get better at it, but yeah, it's just like I never knew how to. And I also just never wanted to put that responsibility on someone of like unleashing all of my like worries and like concerns I've had. And so it just really like added up together of just like me hearing people who didn't want to open up and me not also wanting to open up. And so just like just continuously having that false notion that people were like having such a great time. And I'm sure they probably thought in the beginning, before I got better at like, I guess, being more vulnerable with people, like I'm sure they thought I also was, had everything figured out. But yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like when people ask like, oh, how are you? They don't really expect them to be like, oh, actually, and then they go into like a whole spiel about what's bringing them down. And I feel like that's like the same sentiment or the same idea where it's like if you're catching up with a friend, you don't really want to like unload all of your problems on them. You want to like catch up and like get to know more about their life, like how they're doing, which is why I feel like this podcast is really great, because then it's a way for us to, I guess, like share some of these struggles that we've gone through, or like times where we've maybe felt like we're not being in it, like we're not thriving, or like we're not actually capable of being an adult or whatever. I feel like that, hopefully this podcast can also help other people feel like it's okay to not know what's going on, and it's okay to like not feel okay about everything.
Yeah. Annalise, can I ask, because you were one of the people I really thought just had it all together. Like what has been your experience since you actually had a good chunk of time where we weren't being quote unquote an adult before everything shut down? Like what was your perception, or like were you aware that you were kind of giving off this vibe that you were like thriving and having your best time in Boston?
It's actually kind of funny because I knew, like, we've talked and I knew like you were having a hard time, like you were feeling like homesick in the sense of like home was your friends, right? You're feeling like you're watching people grow, and so I always felt kind of bad like saying like all the great things I've been doing, just because. But again, like I feel super fortunate, super lucky. Like when I started my job, I went through this program where I was introduced with a bunch of other people who are my age, who are also starting out. So over that, we had a connection. That's kind of how I found like my friends. And I think like the biggest thing of coming out of college is to find that group of people, you know? And so I definitely like, I consistently felt super lucky that I was surrounded by such amazing people and that has found such great friends. But then I felt in ways like I did feel like kind of guilty and kind of bad, because it was like, well, okay, I'm having a great time. I love this. But then like to see like my friend like feel stunted, like I didn't feel great about that, you know? So I kind of like two sides also, like you don't really want to unload all your problems, but you also don't want to like be bragging at the same time.
Yeah,
so like how do you find that balance?
Yeah.
How would you feel like, because I feel like especially in the beginning I would like do the same like not unleash the full load of when I would feel like I really wish I wasn't at this point in my life and having such a hard time with it. Like how would you feel when I would kind of start talking about that? Like, would you want to help? I'm just curious, like what you thought when I progressively, I guess, opened up more of like my struggles.
I mean, definitely grateful that you felt comfortable enough to open up, because at the very beginning it was very much like, oh, you know, I'm fine, like, you know, I'm doing stuff and keeping busy. But then like when you actually opened up, it was like a side of you that I didn't realize that was happening. And I think this is why it's also important for us to like to have this outlet and to have like people like this podcast as a way to normalize, you know, feeling stunted or just like feeling down, especially after graduating. So I mean, I didn't honestly, like I didn't feel like you were a burden. I didn't feel like you were putting a lot of pressure on me to do anything. If anything, I was just like glad that we could like talk about it, and I wanted to help in like any way I can, even if it was like to distract you with like talking about random things, you know. Yeah, like I don't know if that's really an answer that you were looking for.
No, I was just curious, because that's what I'm always concerned about. Like, I think opening up to people with like hardships is like, I feel like I'm putting a pressure on them to like give me an answer, but I don't know, that's just like how I am. I like externally processing things and just talking it out, even if they're just listening, I feel like helps me. But in response to you, I feel like when you would tell me how happy you were in Boston, like I felt so happy for you. I was like, oh, I'm so glad. She's like, of course I felt jealous to some degree, but like, I don't know, that's interesting. Like I guess I never thought that way. Like, even though I'm like, oh man, I feel like I'm alone. Like, I want other people to feel like what I'm feeling. But no, I don't feel like that. Like, I'm still happy that there are people.
I want everyone to suffer.
Yeah. I want everyone to know that. I want everyone to feel like they don't have it all together like I do. But no, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like, I was really happy that you've adjusted so well to post-grad life. Yeah. Kimmy, how have you been holding up? Even though your circumstances are a little different.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely, I mean, just the circumstance is so different that I feel like I can't necessarily relate to like the adulting experience, post-grad experience that you had. Just because of quarantine, I've been back at home since March, and like I was doing school and then I graduated and now I'm working part-time. So, and I feel like since everyone else like in my class is doing that same thing, even if they have a full-time job, they're still working remotely, or they moved to a city, but they're working remotely. Like there's less excitement happening and less things post on social media of like, oh, look at me, I'm adulting. So I don't yet feel like I felt that pressure or like felt like I've been stunted at all. But I'm definitely curious to see, like, because we are in a recession, which sucks a lot, and like people are going to get jobs slowly and slowly, and like what point in time will it feel normal, and will those pressures still exist, or at that point in time will we just be like, oh, I'm just so happy to have a job and to be out here in the world not wearing a mask? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, what about like, I guess because you have friends who are older than you, like us,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that, seeing how their life was after graduated and then
Mm-hmm.
how your life is now, like, do you ever
Mm.
have any thoughts or like feelings about that? Like, hey, other people got to experience this, but I'm at home still looking for a job. Um, like, what are your
Mm-hmm.
feelings towards that, if
Mm-hmm.
any?
Yeah, I don't necessarily feel like I think about that a lot. I think like being at home has actually been a really like great experience. I've been fortunate enough to be like happy here, and
Mm-hmm.
this is the longest time I've been home since like first year. So the way that I've been thinking about it is like if this whole thing didn't happen, then I wouldn't have gotten all this time with my family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily comparing myself to people that are the year above, because that's just a factor that I can't control.
Right. I will say though that I think, Kimmy, out of all three of us, you're doing the most in quarantine. Like you're gardening, you're cooking. Like I feel like maybe out
I
of
mean,
all
I
three
have
of
the
us, you're
most free
adulting
time.
the most. You're like adulting the most, honestly.
I'm adulting in my suburb life.
You've got
Yeah.
that, your garden, you're cooking every week. You're
Yeah.
like constantly networking. Meanwhile, I sometimes work while I'm sitting on the bed. Like, it's just really different.
Everyone does that.
Yeah.
Everyone works while they're sitting on the bed.
I mean, currently I'm on the bed.
And you're working in
Yeah,
ways.
that is
So
true.
Yeah. So it sounds like we're in adulthood right now, and parts of our adulthood journey have been marked by certain milestones, like us graduating or us getting a job or applying to med school. But like, what do you think is the next milestone in your life that you would feel like, oh, I'm an adult, like whether it be big or small?
moving back to Boston. No, I'm kidding. But like honestly, I think, yeah, for me, it's probably like going back to being independent.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like maybe like job promotion, maybe like a
Mm.
long-term relationship,
Oh.
maybe like a move to a different city or anything. I don't know. Maybe pet adoption.
Yeah, I was gonna
Oh.
say adopt a pet.
Yeah.
Is it because those things are marked by, um, I don't know, like starting a new phase in your life? Or,
Yeah. And I think also, like, I know we've mentioned this before, but responsibility, I feel like, is
Mm-hmm.
kind of like something that, like, I know we've talked about this, but adulthood and responsibility in my head kind of go hand in hand. But again, it like varies, like what kind of responsibility. So with all those things that I listed, there's like a different level of responsibility involved, you know? Um,
yeah, I feel like since my hopefully next phase of life, knock on wood, is graduate school. So like I feel like, I don't know, just being in that school phase might also just like make me feel like I don't know what's going on even more so than I already feel. Um so I don't know. I feel like it's like little things too, like maybe I'll just get a new credit card, or I'll start have to grocery shop for myself, like those kind of small things. Because I don't think personally, I feel like even if I do go, like actually when I do start my career, I feel like there's gonna be moments where I'm just gonna feel like I don't know what the heck is going on. And yeah, I feel like there's always a part of me, just because like I'm so close to my parents and stuff, that I'll just like always call them when I need help for like the smallest problems. But yeah.
I feel like definitely once I move out, that will feel like the most adulting part of my life so far. Just because I have lived in the same city and attended a school very nearby for the past like 22 years. So I'm excited to kind of carve my own path in a destination where I'm not sure yet where it will be. But other than that, I think like getting a job and being able to like get a lot of benefits from the job, like not relying on my parents for healthcare, putting money into 401k, paying off my student loans, investing, but not day trading, like just simple stuff like that, which will eventually like help me out in the future as far as like finances go, will also feel like a huge step toward adulting.
Yeah.
Kimmy and Annalise, I guess you both named a lot of like task-oriented details for like what marks adulthood. So I'm guessing, are there any like I don't know how to phrase this, but like emotional / personal, like for me, I guess I'm coming from like, I feel like when maybe I'll become an adult when I'm just able to handle conflict better in my life, or be better at expressing my emotions in a beneficial way for myself. So I'm guessing, yeah, like, are there any like personal or like less task related milestones you think will mark a different part of adulthood for you?
Yeah, I think so. Like the two that come to mind is one, I mean, I'm in a relationship, and if we break up, not manifesting that, I don't believe in manifesting, but you know, like breaking up, like that's like a milestone. And then I think the
Okay.
other one,
like do you mean
I
like,
was
Is the other one getting married? Like,
no.
wait, Kimmy, like by that do you mean like you going through that breakup and being able to like emotionally heal yourself? Like you'd be like, okay, that's an adult thing to do. Like, is that what you mean by that? Or like the actual concept of like, I have to break up?
like breaking up and like in ways starting over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
romantically.
yeah, I think the whole process, like, not like I think, oh, if you're with the same person forever, you aren't an adult. I just think that's something that a lot of people go through. That is like one of those human adult experiences, perhaps. The other thing I was going to mention is similar to what Britt was saying. I think like if there ever is conflict with me and my friends, and like if we're at a state where we're communicating very regularly, being able to bring up that conflict or like communicating that better. I was reading a really good book that you should all read called Big Friendship, which basically highlights the point that society, like, we don't necessarily have set guidelines on how to like break up in a friendship or have those difficult conversations. Like there's so many TV shows and books that like show the romance side of things, but when it comes to friends, it's like so awkward and you don't know what to do, and there's more people involved as well, which I feel like makes it difficult. But yeah, that's definitely something I want to work on, and something that would feel like a milestone.
Yeah.
For me, the first thing that came to mind was like the idea of feeling, but I feel, okay, so the thing with me is like I feel like a lot of the things that I'm about to say are still in ways task oriented. So I was gonna say like feeling in ways like some kind of stability emotionally, and maybe, but that could also mean like having a routine, you know, and like just doing things and like knowing what you want and how you like things done. The other thing I was going to say is like very career oriented, but like being able to stand up for myself in my job, being able to like fight for what I want. And I think that those are really, I think, key things of being an adult for me. But again, that's like also kind of task oriented, because it's like, yeah, it's about growth, personal growth, but it's also like, well, you're career driven to like want to grow in your career, you know?
I mean, that's a personal, trait. I feel like that is not everyone has. That it requires growth, I think. I guess I thought it's not like task oriented in the sense of like, oh, knowing how to pay my bills and sign a lease, that kind of stuff.
That's true.
Yeah.
Another thing I was thinking about is that I feel like I would feel like an adult when I travel with friends. And I know that like both you two have experiences with that. So in that experience.
You traveled to like Seattle, right, with friends?
Yeah, but it was only for a few days and it wasn't like outside of the country. Not saying that if you travel inside the country, it's not considered to be traveling, but I think when you're outside of the countries, there's more like hoops that you have to jump through and like language could be a barrier and you just don't know anyone there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. I was gonna say that was. I never. I guess one adult thing was like traveling without an adult parent.
Yeah. I
At
think
the
it's also
airport.
like right. I think it's also like one thing to be like traveling with friends over a spring break or something, but then it's also something else to be like out of college and like figuring out when, like coordinating time with friends to go somewhere.
Point.
I think like that's also another layer, right?
Yeah. Especially because then it feels more like a commitment. Like I know at least for myself and my high school friends, like some people are still in school, going back to school or working a job. And it's like, how are we ever going to find time to actually like spend it all together?
Yeah.
It's another problem post grad.
I know.
Yeah. Which we'll talk about in a later episode, right? Maintaining friendships.
Yes.
Like, Kimmy, what the heck? You literally traveled like Europe by yourself, didn't you? You
Yeah,
did?
but yeah.
What?
Oh, yeah, duh.
Yeah.
Wait,
Before
what? You didn't feel like an
COVID.
adult then?
I mean, I did, but I also think like with your friends, that's like another milestone.
Interesting. I actually,
Yeah.
interesting.
I feel like because there is that component of like, how do you act under stress in conjunction with a lot of people?
Yes.
It takes a lot of, takes a lot of maturity, surprisingly.
Right.
Yeah. When those shoes come off, it's like, don't know what's going on at the airport.
Oh, I was like,
what are you
is this a
saying?
metaphorical shoe you're talking? Like when the gloves come
Asian
off?
house?
You meant literally in TSA.
Yeah, TSA, you just like can't think when everyone's yelling at you and you're like, where are my shoes?
Okay.
That's me personally speaking.
Yeah, so we've talked about a couple of different things. And just to reiterate, I guess, for our listeners, our definition of adulthood is just a time in your life where there's the most change, ambiguity, and growth. And we definitely kind of, talk about some topics related to that. And we'll definitely go into more like a deeper conversation or discussion later on in other episodes. But I guess if you had one tip or trick to our listeners, what would it be?
For my fellow recent grads out there, or if you're still in college, I think like the next 3 years, adulthood really is going to be pending on like the state of you getting a job or living at home or trying to figure out your next step. So I think it's just important to be like cognizant of the state that we're in is like so abnormal to what our like older peers have gone through.
Yeah, I guess mine would have to be like, you're really not to say that everyone's experience is the same, but like you're really not alone in the fact in feeling like you don't know what's going on. And even if you think you are, it's probably not exactly what you're perceiving it to be.
Yeah. I guess I would say that we talked a lot about like uncertainty in adulthood and like struggles, but also don't let that, take away from the fact that you can have fun as an adult. Adulthood can be exciting. You could have a very positive experience. And for some people, it can be stressful, but it's also a new chapter in your life that I think people should embrace and celebrate if they feel like they can.
Well, I think we should celebrate the end of our first episode.
Yay!
Yay! And we'll see you in 2 weeks for our next episode as we share how we are navigating our careers, postgrad lives, and the whole adulting experience.
Yay.
Bye!
Thanks. Bye.